kicked out my husband and his manipulative female best friend after he moved her into our house and tried to share a room with her. So I, 28F, have been married to my husband, 30M, for 4 years. We got married after 3 years of dating. He and I have had a normal relationship apart from this one factor, his relationship with his best friend. His best friend, as he calls her, was his neighbor growing up and they did everything together. I'll refer to her as Fiona. Fiona and my husband went to the same daycare, kindergarten, middle school, and high school too. They also went to the same college but were in different departments. They have been inseparable since they were kids, something I cannot forget because they keep bringing it up every chance they get. They only went their separate ways once they got jobs, thankfully. That's how I met my husband, and Fiona tells me that I'm the third woman in my husband's life. The first being his mother, the second being she, and then, me. She says it like it's a joke, but I'm not sure if she doesn't actually mean it. Full disclosure, I've always thought that she didn't like me and saw me as competition. When my husband and I first started dating, he had introduced her to me as his oldest friend and I had tried to be nice to her, but she instantly started making fun of how much makeup I'd been wearing that day and told me that I didn't need to impress her. This continued and she would often take potshots at me about my makeup, my clothes, and stuff. If not that, then there were always backhanded compliments to make me feel insecure. She once told me to my face that my husband's type was dumb blondes. I am blonde. I guess by now, you guys have an idea of the kind of woman I'm talking about. I tried to talk to my husband several times while we were dating to tell him that I didn't have a good feeling about Fiona, but he brushed it off and always told me that I would warm up to her eventually. And that she was an acquired taste because she never minced her words and was a little too blunt for other women to handle. I guess the fact that my husband kept putting down everyone else to make her seem like a good person should have been enough of a warning for me, but honestly, at the time, it seemed like a small price to pay to be with him. Because he was a perfect guy otherwise. He was everything I ever wanted, smart, funny, charming, and I was ready to tolerate Fiona because I really wanted to be with him. And he always made sure that I knew he loved me, so everything was good. I started ignoring Fiona after some time and didn't let her get under my skin. And once she found a guy for herself, it got even better because she stopped picking on me for no reason. 4 years ago, Fiona met Eddie on a dating app, and within a year, they were engaged. To say that she was smitten with him would be an understatement, and he seemed pretty in love with her as well. In spite of their obvious affection for one another, I still believe that a year was not enough to really get to know someone, and they hadn't even been living together for long enough to entertain the idea of marriage. But Fiona and I are not friends, and I knew that if I tried to say something to her, she would make a fuss out of it, so I kept my mouth shut. I did tell my husband about it, hoping that he would nudge her in the right direction, but he only kept talking about how great it was that both he and Fiona were engaged at the same time and would probably end up getting married around the same time as well. They had been talking about a joint wedding, but I shot that idea down before it got out of control by saying that Fiona and her ideas were very different from what I wanted, and thankfully, she didn't insist on it. She got married to Eddie around a month after us, and everything was beautiful until very recently. 5 months ago, Fiona confided in my husband and told him that she had been struggling to get pregnant and she and Eddie were about to get tested since they've been trying for almost 6 months with no results. And unfortunately, Fiona turned out to be infertile. Things started going sour in her marriage after that revelation, and even though they tried marriage counseling, it didn't work for her because Eddie decided to file for divorce anyway. Because he couldn't be with a woman who he couldn't have his own kids and family with, and he didn't want to waste any more of his life. It was really low and disgusting of him, and I actually felt pretty bad for Fiona. She started visiting us way more often than she used to, and I put up with it because I knew that she was going through a really difficult time, and my husband was obviously the only friend that she could count on. I honestly didn't even have the heart to feel annoyed by her frequent visits because every time she would come over, she would just be crying and my husband would try to console her. It was quite impossible to feel annoyed by someone who was already suffering so much because I knew that she really loved Eddie. Then the process of coming to a settlement started, and she had to see him when they met for their sessions, which proved to be even more difficult for her, and she started spiraling even deeper. So my husband asked me if she could live with us for a while until she started feeling better, because she claimed that apparently being around us made her feel sane again. That was almost 2 weeks ago, and as soon as I let her into my house, I started to regret it. Not only was she critical of every single thing that I did, but she got away with it as well because of how depressed she was. She didn't like the cooking, she didn't like the way our house had been decorated, and she didn't like the shows that I watched, so we had to do everything her way because my husband believed that she needed it right now. I told him several times that I wanted her out and that she could move back in with her parents if she was going to be ungrateful, but he begged me to let her stay because he was afraid that she might end up doing something stupid to herself if we kicked her out at such a delicate stage. So I didn't say anything to her because I wouldn't want something like that on my conscience. However, I had to kick both of them out of my house the day before yesterday because they took things way too far. When I came back home from work, I realized that my husband had moved a lot of his stuff from our bedroom to the guest bedroom, where Fiona had been living. He had actually come back home early to do all that, and when I returned, he and Fiona were still moving his things to the guest bedroom. I was really confused and I asked to speak with him privately, but he told me that I could speak with him freely in front of her because she wouldn't mind. Truth be told, for the first time in several weeks, Fiona actually looked like she was happy. So I asked him why he was moving his things into the guest bedroom, and he told me, quite casually, that he was going to be living with Fiona in the same room now. I was stunned for a few seconds, and when I asked him why that was, he told me that Fiona had been having panic attacks for several days in a row and she needed someone to be there to comfort her when she woke up in the middle of the night and was losing her mind over her divorce. I instantly told him that he couldn't do that, and it was crazy that he even expected me to be okay with it, but he used the same excuse that he had been using for years when it came to Fiona and said that she was like a sister to him and I had nothing to worry about. Both of them were smiling at me, as if smiling about this was going to make this better and make it seem like a normal thing to want to do. I was so angry and frustrated that I wanted to smack them both, but instead, my anger reached such a crazy level that I chose to deal with it a different way. I smiled right back at them and told them that I understood where they were coming from and it was all completely fine with me. My husband even had the audacity to say that he knew I would be okay with it, and they went back to setting up the room. In the meantime, I went back to our bedroom and brought out the deed to our house. This house had been a gift to me by my father from when I got my first job, so it only had my name on it, and legally, the house belongs to me. When I found that document, I went back into the guest room and asked them really sweetly if they were done unpacking. When they said that they were, I told them that they could start packing again. Because they were about to end up on the streets, where they could play happy family all they wanted to. My husband looked really confused for a while until I brought out the deed and told him that this house was mine and I was no longer going to tolerate either of them living under my roof and disrespecting me. He tried to laugh it off because he thought that I was joking, but when I didn't laugh along, he told me that I was being ridiculous and that I couldn't just kick them out. So I told him that I could, and I was actively in the process of kicking them out, so he couldn't argue with me. I told him that I was sick of him, and I was even more sick of having Fiona around because she was nothing but a blubbering mess right now, and a really annoying one at that. She started crying yet again when I said that, and my husband started to defend her and accused me of always being jealous of her because I was insecure. I didn't even bother to deny it because it was true, I was insecure. But that had nothing to do with me and everything to do with their weird relationship. I told them if they really couldn't live without each other, then they should probably only stick to each other instead of getting with other people and ruining their lives, like mine. It turned into a really nasty fight after that, but eventually, they did go away because my husband said that he felt insulted since he had been nothing but loyal to me, but even that wasn't good enough for me. Fiona didn't stop crying until she was out of the house and accused me of being evil and jealous, even as she was leaving. I didn't respond to her because I just didn't have the energy to argue with them anymore. I just wanted them to go away. I had believed that my troubles would come to an end once they were gone, but apparently not. Because as soon as I kicked them out, our common friends who had never felt the need to talk about our relationship started texting me to tell me that I was making a big deal out of nothing. They believed that my husband was just trying to be a good friend to Fiona because panic attacks are no joking matter, and instead of taking it seriously, I was making it all about myself and my own insecurities. I could tell that he had put them up to this because the content of all the messages was pretty much the same, more or less. So I tried to ignore it, but then he got all his family and relatives to talk to me as well, and they were all telling me that I was being horrible to both of them by kicking them out when Fiona was going through such a difficult phase of her life. They told me that I was heartless and that I didn't deserve a husband like him in the first place because they had always known that I was never going to be good enough for him. And deep down, even I knew that, which is why I was so insecure and felt threatened by Fiona. I didn't think that it was worth it to try and argue with them, so I just blocked everybody for my own peace of mind, since nobody was going to understand what I was going through. Because they didn't even care, they only cared about my husband and Fiona and what they felt. I thought that blocking them was the solution and was going to file for divorce, but then my husband reached out to me through a different number and told me that he was still willing to come back to me, as long as I apologized. In that message, he told me yet again that he had always considered Fiona as the sister that he never had and had never had any romantic feelings for her. So I was really misinterpreting the whole situation. He told me that he cared for her deeply and even loved her, but it was more of a platonic sisterly love and not the romantic kind that I believed he had for her. Since that was just reserved for me, he told me that the thought of going through life without me was devastating for him. He said that he had made a mistake by leaving that day, but he also believed that I had reacted really harshly and misjudged the situation. He wanted me to think about things with a cooler head and consider the consequences of whatever I was planning to do calmly, since he didn't want me to make a mistake and then regret it for the rest of my life. He is ready to come back to me and mend our relationship as long as we can both apologize to each other for the misunderstandings. I really don't know how to react to that because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think I was harsh. But I don't know if it's the right call for me anymore to get divorced from him, since he insists that Fiona is like a sister to him. In all honesty,